It took several doctor visits and a couple of months for a Huntington County man to finally find out what was wrong with him. Here's Scott Maslanik'S journey. Scott Maslanik has taught at Juniata Valley High School for 21 years. As a health teacher, he plans to make his personal story a part of his curriculum. This is what he'll tell the class.
In May of 2017, I developed an ulcer, what I thought was an ulcer, on my tongue, and it just wouldn't go away.
After numerous doctor visits with no success, Scott was referred to an ear, nose, and throat specialist.
The doctor that saw him that time quickly realized that there was something more going on and acted on it immediately. Within 2 days of that, he was getting his biopsy.
A week later, he comes in and says, yes, it's cancer. Where would you like to go? I chose Hershey.
And that's where Scott and Stephanie were a week later.
When you looked in his mouth, he had an ulcer that was about 3.5 centimeters in diameter on the right side of his tongue. It was extending somewhat onto the floor of his mouth and somewhat backwards towards the back of his tongue.
Well, how do I get this? And she said HPV. I was exposed at some point to HPV and it lay dormant.
So this is a sexually transmitted disease, typically in the oropharynx, that the body usually clears, but in a very small percentage of patients, it will linger.
I think that was the biggest shock of it being tongue cancer. You think of tongue cancer and you think of tobacco use, smoking, and even the HPV part of it. As far as the two of us go, we were the lowest risk categories for any of that.
Dr. Andrews recommended surgery.
She just basically explained step by step, you'll need surgery. We can get you set up with the other head and neck cancer surgeon who also does reconstruction. That would probably be in your best interest. You'll most likely need radiation. That's a standard precaution in treating head and neck cancer.
She laid it all out on the table what would happen. She said it could be 11-hour surgery. I was like, really?
So I removed about 40% of the right side of his tongue, the front part of the tongue, plus a bit of the back part of the tongue, also extending onto the floor of the mouth. I also removed lymph nodes from the right side of the neck that were most at risk for spread of the cancer microscopically. And Dr. Goyle ended up taking over for the reconstructive portion of the operation.
It almost works like a transplant. We actually borrow the skin from the arm, some of the muscles, some of the fat, and we take an artery and a vein and we bring it up to the neck and reconnect those vessels, almost like pipes in plumbing. And by doing that, we give life to this piece of tissue again and allow it to function.
After Scott healed from the surgery, doctors ordered 6 weeks of radiation.
The tumor was behaving a little bit more aggressively, and so there was concern that there could be microscopic cancer cells beyond what we were resecting. And in that case, radiation can afford directed treatment to whatever's left, and by doing so, you reduce the risk of the cancer coming back.
The first 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, was fine. About week 3, right around Christmas Eve, my mouth just was so sore, I couldn't even drink water. So food was out of the question.
Scott used a feeding tube through the rest of his radiation treatment.
Unfortunately, one of the downsides of radiation is it definitely irritates and burns both the normal tissue as well as the reconstructed tissue. And so his speech declined during his radiation therapy, and now he's starting to come back on the mend.
Radiation was by far the hardest part. I mean, yes, surgery was hard and overwhelming, and there was the fear of like the what ifs, but radiation definitely knocked him down. And it was much more difficult than we ever anticipated it being.
Scott rang the bell to mark the end of radiation. Weeks later, he began to see improvements.
Once again, I'm back on track. Everything is getting better every day.
I think he's doing great. Every time I see something different, it's a celebration of like, okay, you did that, you weren't doing that last week.
The bell on the bus goes ding, 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 all day long.
Progress noted, that will be intertwined into Scott's health class curriculum.
Of course, my cancer chapter is going to be a little more expensive. I'll have a little more personal story to impart. It's definitely going to make a difference.
I think that they'll receive it well because it's their teacher. It's their teacher that they respect and that they admire. And so to hear his story hopefully will help them think about their choices in what they're doing.
Scott is back in the classroom teaching. He says he feels stronger every day.